Welcome to another chapter podcast with your hosts, Claire and Rebecca.
Do you love books? Well, you've come to the right place. Join us as we discuss all things books. Welcome to Chapter 2 of Another Chapter, the podcast.
Just so you know, a list of the books that are recommended in this episode will be in the show notes. Just because I know if it was me, I would have a pen and paper ready and I'd be trying to write down every single book that's mentioned. So we've made it a little bit easier for you. So for our first interview, our chapter 1, it really was a no-brainer as to who we would be asking. This person is a well-known bookstagrammer and has brought the Tired Mammies of Ireland together through our shared love of reading. Her monthly Zooms are a little slice of me time for both Rebecca and I, and there really is nothing nicer than sitting down with a bunch of friendly faces and chatting about the shared experience of a book that you've just read. The Tired Mammy Book Club is a must-follow page on Instagram, and we really hope you enjoy getting to know its founder a bit better through today's interview with Sinéad Cuddihy.
Everyone to chapter 2 of Another Chapter podcast, and today we have a lady who for a lot of people needs absolutely no introduction whatsoever, but for those of you who may not know who she is, if you're not on Irish Bookstagram for example or involved in the libraries, our interviewee tonight is Sinéad Cuddihy. So Sinéad is the face and the name behind the Tired Mammy Book Club, which has been running since, I think your first post was 2019, Sinéad, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, about May 2019.
Excellent. And just from my little bit of investigating on it, I think you said that you kind of started the page to focus yourself more on reading and getting with like-minded people. And definitely with nearly 9,000 followers now, you've absolutely achieved that. You were the reason why both myself and Claire are so active on Bookstagram, so you were a natural choice for our first interview, and we are so thankful that you agreed to it. And I'll hand you over to Claire now. Is there anything you'd like to say introduction-wise before she gets to the questions?
No, well, I mean, thanks so much for having me on, and best of luck with the podcast. I suppose, my name's Sinéad. I run Tired Mammy Book Club, an online book club on Instagram, as you well know. Mm-hmm. And I never sort of imagined when I started it in May 2019 that it would, kind of take off the way it has. And, the Bookstagram, Irish Bookstagram will grow the way it has in the last few years, and, the people that I've met through it. So I'm sure we'll get to all that over the course of this evening. But thanks very much for having me on.
No bother. Thank you for agreeing to join us. So for anyone who doesn't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as I said, I'm Sinéad. I work full-time in an industry very far removed from Bookstagram. I have 2 small children. I live in Dublin, and I set up Tired Mammy Book Club back in, I think it was around, my first post was at the end of April, which was basically saying that my first post would be in May. And we chose the first book, which was Leanne Moriarty's, I can't even remember which one it was now, but I can see the cover. It's typical of me. I can see the cover and I can't think of the title now. But so basically when I first started it, it was down to a couple of reasons. For a start, my mother had joined a book club in her estate, and I was sort of jealous of that, but didn't want to cramp her style by asking could I join. So I kind of wanted to set up something myself. I was always a big reader, and at times I'd kind of dip in and out of it, and I found that when I was pregnant and had my first child, reading kind of went to the back of my mind, and I wanted to really get back into it, and so I decided to set up my own book club. And I asked, at the time, I followed a lot of Irish kind of mammy accounts and that sort of thing, so it made sense for me to set up a book club on Instagram. And I asked on my personal page if anyone would join a book club if I set it up, and one person said they would. So that wasn't very encouraging. And I spoke to my husband about it at the time, and he kind of said, build it and they will come. And they did, and I think, Instagram and social media and the internet can get a very bad name, but Instagram, particularly Bookstagram, is a good place, I think, to meet like-minded people. And I think, more and more people started sort of either setting up Bookstagram accounts as opposed to just their personal accounts, and sort of nearly ignoring their personal accounts in favour of their Bookstagram accounts, because they did get a chance to meet other people and just, talk about books all the time.
Absolutely. It's a lovely community. I'm so happy that I joined, and I'm not even there a year, but I think it's a fabulous addition to somebody's social life, I suppose, online social life.
Absolutely. And I think at the time, like when I first set up Tired Mammy Book Club, it was before COVID, before all of that. And we actually had our first couple of meetings in person. And then, COVID hit and, nobody could meet up, nobody could do anything. And the first few book clubs after that, I just sort of posted questions on Instagram, and then I decided to do it on Zoom. And that's been great because, I've met so many people online, and people that I actually think I've met in real life but haven't, because I've spoken to them once a month online. And we've had people joining from, New York, Canada, various places. And I think for them, that's meant a lot to them as well, to be able to kind of chat to people from home, or, just chat to like-minded people. And we kind of do it late enough in the evening that anyone who has other commitments can join, from the comfort of their sitting room or bedroom. And, it's a way, especially during kind of, lockdowns and things like that, that we were able to kind of get to talk to other people, see people face to face. And then as time went on, we actually got to meet up again. And, that's another lovely side to it as well, between book launches and various meetups. I've got to meet a lot of the Bookstagram community as well,
It's fab, and like you must feel a great sense of pride that you've brought so many people together, really, because it's only through some of the book club Zooms that I found other accounts. You kind of look at who's online and you take a look at their pages and give them a follow, because they're clearly like-minded people.
Yeah, like it is a great way to connect. Like, and people, I think everyone's always sort of, sharing each other's pages, and whether it's a kind of a "what are you doing now" post, or, that's, you'll always kind of find new people, and there's always new people joining. Like, I love when I see a little, a suggestion, and there's either, a little Irish flag or a little book in the profile, and I'm like, oh, and I have a quick look, and I'm like, oh, I love all those books, so I'm going to follow them. And, immediately, like, as soon as somebody joins Irish Bookstagram, 10 people have shared their page within an hour saying, oh, new Irish Bookstagrammer is on, or,
Yeah, which is very lovely. And can I ask you, what's your favourite thing about running the Tired Mammy Book Club?
I think I already hit on it, really, when I say, the people first and foremost. I've met so many great people online and in person, and I've made really good friends that are now friends in real life. And I know it's the same for you guys, and for people in all corners of the country have met up with local Bookstagrammers. Either they've bumped into them in the library, or they bumped into them down the shops, and they'd be like, oh, I follow that person, and I wonder, should I go up and say hello, and these kind of things. Or met intentionally, kind of saying, oh, there's this book launch on, do you think we should go to that? And you might never have met them before, you might have talked for 100 hours in the DMs and on book clubs. So I think the people, book people are good people.
Absolutely.
And the books that I've been introduced to as a result of Bookstagram, like when I started this, I don't think I'd ever listened to an audiobook, which is shocking to me now, because I love audiobooks. I'm never stopped talking about audiobooks now, and I don't think I'd listened to one, 4 or 5 years ago. Just wasn't something I really thought of. And also the sort of the range of books that I would read now is much broader than it would have been before. I would very much have stuck to, sort of popular fiction, commercial fiction, crime fiction.
Yes.
And now a lot more non-fiction, young adult graphic novels, stuff like that. So that's another, great thing about it.
It definitely changes people's reading habits, I think, doesn't it, being online in a community like this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And on the opposite side of that, then, what's the most challenging thing about running the book club?
For me, the most challenging thing about running the book club is the timing of reading the book. Because, I have a whole month to read the book, and I spend the first week or so saying, better not read it now, because I'll have forgotten most of the detail by the time it comes to the end of the month. And then I kind of look up and it's the 27th or something. I'm like, oh, I have to get that read by Sunday.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the most challenging things for me. I think, at times some people, I think, with the book club feel, oh, I don't really like that book, or I don't think I'd read that book or that genre. And I always say, obviously, everybody can read, or not read a book in a particular month. But I also think it's a great way to step outside your comfort zone a little bit and maybe read a book that you haven't read. And there have been some choices now. There's been some books that I haven't finished, and that's fine too. But, generally speaking, I think it's a good way to sort of read something you may not have picked up otherwise.
Absolutely. And one that kind of stands out for me from the Tired Mammy Book Club is The Girl with the Loading Voice. Don't know if that was like my second or third book club pick, and I just kind of picked it up and I said, I'll give it a go anyway. And I absolutely loved it. I wasn't expecting to at all.
I hear that so often. And when people say, oh, I'm not going to read the book this month, it's just not something I'd be interested in. I kind of, I would love to just say, just try, because you never know. And I think, you experienced that. Obviously that was the book in February. And yeah, I can't believe that was only February.
Yeah.
But...
So can I ask you, what has been your favourite book from the book club this year?
This year, I think probably two books that have really stood out. Bessborough by Deirdre Finnerty, which was probably the most widely read and widely attended book club of the year, and also Take My Hand by Darlene Perkins Valdez. I think also both are very important books. Bessborough obviously being the real stories of three women who'd been sent to Bessborough House, and Take My Hand is, I suppose, a fictionalised version of a true story of two young black girls who were 12 and 14 at the time and who were sterilised without their consent in Alabama in 1973. I think that kind of, those true stories getting told either, in a real life version or a fictionalised version, they're very important stories, and to have the authors on to talk to us about them was fantastic. So those were the ones that really stood out for me this year.
They were excellent, to be fair, and both authors were so good in the meetings. It was fab. So thank you for organising them, actually.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, Dylan just she did a load of book clubs around that kind of time. And yeah, she's just, she's incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely. So can I ask you, what is your earliest memory of reading as a kid? Do you know where your passion for reading came from?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was actually just, I was down in Clare at the weekend, and my mum is one of 10, and she would be a big reader, she reads every single night. And when we were down there, my granny will be 97 tomorrow. And she was reading, she got a book for her birthday, the John Creedon book, what is it called? Oh yeah, an Irish folklore treasury. So my granny was sitting there on Saturday night, reading the book. And my mum, when she was going to bed, she was like, oh, I didn't bring my book. And I was like, oh, there's a load of books here on the shelf. And I was there reading them out, trying to pick one for her. And the next day, she said she didn't get to sleep till 2:00. And I was like, you should have read a book. Because she always reads going to bed. And as a child, she always read to me every night. My dad is more of a storyteller. He'd make up his own stories, but my mum always read to me. And, one of my really clear memories of reading as a child was actually in this room. I grew up in this house, and I remember distinctly crying my eyes out when I finished the BFG because it was over.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And I loved it so much. So I think, I'm very lucky that there was always books around, and my mum always read to me. We went to the library a lot. I now bring my son to the library. On his first day of school, I had said I'd, bring him to the toy shop or something to get him something, and we were walking past the library on the way home, and he said, can we go to the library? I was like, well, if we go to the library, we probably won't have time to go to the toy shop. And he's like, well, can we go to the library?
Oh, that's really sweet.
We went into the library, and I think it's the same library I went to as a child, and, it's great. So.
And do you have a favourite book as a child? Would it be the BFG?
Yeah, the BFG would be one of them, I suppose. Roald Dahl and Enid Blyton would have been, as a child of the 80s, they would have been the big ones. But also there was a lot of great Irish writers, like the Lavenders books, June Considine. They were great. And Under the Hawthorn Tree, Rita Conlon McKenna.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't remember, I think my dad got it for me, but it was called Adam's Ark, and it was by Paul Stewart. And it's about this autistic boy who gets a cat called Oscar, and they can kind of communicate using this sort of special animal language or something, mammalog, I think it was called. And it's just a really, really sweet book. And it's out of print, unfortunately, but a few years ago, Bob from the Gutter Bookshop, actually, I was having a conversation with him about it. He just opened the Gutter Bookshop at the time, and he actually tracked down a copy for me. So I do have that, and I did have a read back of it at the time, and it's, you know, still a very beautifully written book. But yeah, so many books, and like a lot of them just aren't really in print anymore. But I think, you know, like back in those days, like in the 90s, Poolbeg had a great range of books for kids, and you know, we've some great publishers of Irish children's books here, so we're very lucky. Like, and I would have, again, my dad used to get them through work and get a lot of the Irish books, so you know, I had that as well, so I was very lucky.
Yeah, that's fine. So reading has obviously been a very big part of your life from your childhood. Like, why do you think as an adult now it's important for us to talk about books?
I think there's a couple of reasons that it's really important to talk about books. I mean, one, books are brilliant. And, you know, we're sharing suggestions, and, you know, like, I never stop. Like, it's ridiculous. You know, I go to somebody's house and I'm looking at the bookshelf, or if I'm ever on a Zoom, I'm seeing, you know, what's behind them. You know, either in work or on the book club calls. I'm always like, what do they got there? And, you know, if I'm in a sort of social situation, I always kind of go to like, so you're reading anything at the moment? And if they're like, oh, I don't really read, I'm like, oh, okay, right, what do we talk about then? You know, I think I've just gotten so used to talking to book people now that I don't know how to communicate with people who don't read. There are a lot of really important books out there that are teaching us something about, you know, another culture, another part of society, something that happened in our history. You know, there are some really important books being written and published, and there's also just some really great, enjoyable books that, if we're not talking about them, we're missing out, basically.
Yeah, that's very true. Now, can I ask you, like, we're all readers, we've all experienced reading slumps. What do you do personally to get out of a reading slump, or does that happen to you that often?
Oh, it does, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'll go through fits and starts. Like, years ago, I would, you know, read a load of books over the space of a month or two, and then I might not pick up a book for 6 months. It was just, you know, that was sort of my reading slump back then. Obviously now it's a lot different because I'm exposed to books much more. But I still get reading slumps, and when that happens, I kind of just let it happen. I don't force it. I don't push myself too much. I sort of take a little step back and, you know, catch up my podcasts, or just, you know, look at TikTok videos of Harry Styles or whatever, and just kind of, when the mood takes me back, I mean, it's usually only about 24 to 48 hours later, I'll then kind of shop my shelves and look at what I have and say, right, what do I fancy? I kind of look at the books around the house, and piles everywhere, and say, what do I feel like reading? Like, I'm a real mood reader, so I don't make it too hard. I think, you know, I think some people are great at kind of structuring their reading, and they know what they're going to read in, you know, October 2023. That's not me. I don't know what I'm going to read next. I think with obviously the book club and buddy reads and things like that are happening, that does give me some inspiration and some bit of discipline. For reading slumps, I would say, look at the genres you love. Don't kind of feel like, oh, I have to read this book because everybody's talking about it, or I have to read this book because it's very important. If you love crime fiction, or you love romance, or you love historical fiction, go to that and say, right, this is my comfort read. This will get me back into it. Or like, pick up a book of short stories. Like, I used to think that short stories weren't really for me, and now I just think they're absolutely fantastic. Like the Emily Pine Notes to Self is an incredible collection, you know, and there's novellas like Claire Keegan. Pick up one of her books, and you know, you'd have it read in a couple of hours, and you read one of her books and you're like, wow. And a lot of authors like Graham Norton and Margaret Atwood and all of these great authors also have shorter books that you can just pick up, so it'll kind of just jumpstart you again, you know.
They're fab recommendations. Thanks very much for those. So with like obviously we read a whole variety of books, and we're kind of talking recently, myself and Rebecca, amongst ourselves about like books being underappreciated, and to know that there's a lot of hype around certain books online, and then some other books are kind of overlooked. So is there any underappreciated book that you love and that you'd recommend for people?
I think that's a difficult question because unfortunately I do buy into the hype a little bit. I'm on Bookstagram so much that I am seeing those books.
Yeah, I think we all do. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it can be hard. And I know, like, I think before Bookstagram, you might have just, browsed the shelves or gone into the library and had a look and picked something up. And now you've kind of got more of a, TBR that you have in mind. But like one book I read this year, which I haven't seen much of on certainly not on Irish Bookstagram, which I really enjoyed, was Isaac and the Egg. It's Bobby Palmer. It was published in August.
Oh yeah.
Kind of beautiful, quirky story, and it's about grief, but it's also kind of weird. And I don't want to give too much away because it's kind of one of those books you kind of need to go into blind. I saw it on NetGalley and I just kept seeing it every time I went in. And I was like, right, fine, I'll request it. And I actually really loved it. I went out and bought a copy for myself as soon as it was published. And it's a really, really special kind of book. And I haven't seen much of it online.
Yeah, and I think you're possibly one of the only people I've seen recommend that book. So is there any book that you think has had the biggest impact on your life that you would encourage people to read?
That's a sort of, there's so many different ways you could take that question. Like, I think the books we read as children, I think, are very important because, they make us readers. But I also think that, like Besborough, Besborough is a book that everybody should be reading. It should be on the curriculum. Everybody should be, sent a copy for Christmas. Because those are really important parts of our history that need to be shared and need to be told. And also, Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dabiri is another great book. It's, it's sort of a different outlook on race and racism, that, it's not just about skin colour, it's also about hair. And it really, really made me think. And, I would consider myself to be quite to read quite broadly. But this gave me another perspective. So I think there are so many non-fiction books that probably do make that impact. Like, God, there's just so many. I couldn't even think. But
yeah, I know it's a hard question.
Like, I think even then, when it comes back to fiction, like I loved, Shuggie Bain and books like that. I think it's really important to read books that just get into your heart as well. It's not always about a great message or learning something, but some of those books just really, you feel them.
Yeah. So the next question that I have for you is, what was the last book that kept you up at night?
I'm wondering if I got it here. Yeah, I do. Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. I read that recently.
Oh yeah.
I got an ARC copy, and it is. Oh, it's just really good. Like, it's, Liz Nugent is fantastic. I always loved Liz Nugent's books.
She's brilliant.
And it's really, I think, back to kind of unraveling Oliver type of books. Really enjoyed that. And yeah, I'm trying to think of any other books. Like, I'm terrible. I just, I mainly, like, I would read a lot, like listen to books during the day, and then at night read a few pages, and I'm gone. But yeah, I definitely did stay up for that one, like, because it's very well written and very enjoyable.
Yeah, I have that as an ARC as well, and I need to pick it up.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, another one that kept me up, Where I End by Sophie White.
Yes.
That is just incredible. It is so difficult to say I loved this book without seeming like you're very disturbed, because it is quite a disturbing book. But it's an excellent book.
It's so unsettling, isn't it?
It's so unsettling, but she is just such an incredible writer.
Yeah.
I saw that she had a book out that was published by Tram Press. Like, I pre-ordered that book on the 30th of June, which I think was the day it was announced.
Yeah.
It's just, incredible.
There's a lot of talk about that book as well, and it's like, I've read some of Sophie's other books and they're fab, but I was not expecting this.
They're just totally different. Like, she has an incredible talent because she has written sort of commercial fiction. She has written, this book. She has written Corpsing, which is, a book of essays mainly about her own life. And she also has a cookbook, but, recipes of a nervous breakdown, which is about her own sort of experience with mental illness and combined with some recipes. So a very broad range of books, but yeah, Where I End is a very different kettle of fish altogether. I also read Wives Under the Sea and The Colony kind of in and around the same time. So there was a lot of a sort of a similar theme going on with, the sea and the island and creepiness. And so, yeah, I'd actually recommend those three to be read close together. All three excellent books.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there any book that you reread regularly? And if so, why?
I'm not a huge rereader. I think that, there's so many books out there that I need to get read. But I have read, I've read To Kill a Mockingbird several times over the years. Obviously, it's one of those books that I read when I was young. I actually read Malibu Rising a second time this year because with Carrie Soto coming out, I wanted to sort of read it again. Most people prefer Daisy Jones or Evelyn Hugo, but Malibu Rising is my favourite. I want to read... I also read Rachel's Holiday again this year because I was going to read again Rachel, and I wouldn't mind reading some of the other books, of that sort of Marion Keyes era. I would like to read Shuggie Bain again. I would like to read The Stranding by Kate Sawyer again. So there's a few books that I've kind of actually read really only in the last couple of years that I often think about and would like to go back and read again. But I'm not a huge rereader because, as I said, there's just so many to read. But I have great intentions of rereading books.
That's fine.
That I loved.
So I suppose my last fun question for you is, as Rebecca had said, we both started following you and now consequently read an awful lot more. So what is a book that you would recommend to someone who wants to get back into reading, and why?
I think the books that I always sort of, again, I think it depends on what you're into yourself. But personally, I've always recommended Andrea Mara's books because back in, again, 2017, 2018, when her first book came out, it got me out of a reading slump, and I've read all her books since. I think they're very, you get to the end of each chapter and there's a little bit of a what happens next element. And what I love in some of her books is there's a kind of a jump then to a different part of the story or a different timeline. So then you have to kind of wait for two chapters. But again, I love crime fiction. I love thrillers. I love sort of that sort of genre. So that works for me. But I'd say, have a look around the library, see what's on, like in any of the libraries that have the short loans. They're brilliant because they really are the most popular books and you can take them out for 10 days. And, so I'd say just, go with the genre you're into. For me, that's probably going to be a real page turner, like Andrea Mara, Catherine Ryan Howard, Liz Nugent, somebody like that,
Yeah, I always actually recommend Liz Nugent as well to anyone that's asking for a book recommendation to get into reading. So
actually, Graham Norton as well. I hadn't read Graham Norton until recently, and I read his latest book. I absolutely loved it. It was so enjoyable. It's such an easy read, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest. Like, it's great when you kind of, obviously everybody else in the world has read Graham Norton. I hadn't. So I was delighted because I was like, oh, this is a new author for me.
No, thank you very much for that. Are you up for a quick fire round?
Me? I have to say, I am terrible at remembering like titles or books or anything like that. So.
Oh no, it's nothing like that.
Okay. As in, like if somebody says to me, oh, could you recommend a really good book? I'm like, I don't remember any book I've ever read.
Yeah, I'm like that as well, I have to say.
Let's give it a go.
And they're just literally one or the other. So hardback or paperback?
Paperback.
Ebook or audio?
Audio.
DNF or power through?
DNF.
All the way. Bookmark or dog ear?
Oh, bookmark. Don't dog ear. Never.
Lend books to friends or never?
It depends on the friend.
Okay, that's fair.
Probably, and I have done this, I would probably buy them their own copy if it's a book that's really important to me. If I love the book, I'll just buy them their own copy.
Yes.
I did that to my husband. I bought him his own copy of a book that I loved because I wouldn't lend him my copy.
Oh, at least you're still talking.
It just goes to show how much I love books.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you read one book at a time or multiple books at a time?
Multiple books at a time, and only since Bookstagram. Before I couldn't imagine that, and now somebody says to me, "What are you reading?" I'm like, "Well, on audio or physical book or ebook or."
Okay, borrow or buy?
Both. Borrow from the library and buy.
Okay. Should we tag authors in posts or no?
No. Even if it's a good review, I think hashtag the title, they can find them if they want them. I think a lot of authors don't even want to read good reviews unless they're in the right place for it.
Mm-hmm. Real life book club or online?
I'm a bit biased because mine is currently online, but I'd say both. And I think there's space for multiple book clubs. I'm trying to join a neighborhood one and I'm on a couple of online ones. So I'd say there's plenty of room for both. But online is great in terms of accessibility for people who are all over the country and all over the world. So
absolutely. Yeah. There's your quick fire round. So I'm going to get Rebecca back on, if that's all right, Rebecca. Thanks very much, Sinead. You were fab.
No bother. I was muted for most of that because there are still various smaller people upstairs and I didn't want noise. But hopefully you noticed I was nodding along and laughing and smiling at an awful lot of those answers because so much resonated. Your recommendations, just your approach to books, some of your answers, I was like, yeah, that's exactly my attitude to things as well. And one thing I'd like to ask before we kind of finish up is, like, when you started, so you started this April 2019, did you envisage when you started the page that it would be what it is now? You know, this many followers, kind of this active on, we'll say, the online book club meetings, getting invited to events, all that kind of stuff. Could you ever have guessed that it would be like it is?
Absolutely no, not at all. Like I don't understand it really. Like I feel like I'm winging it entirely. I kind of get these ideas sometimes. Like setting up the book club was just a random idea I had one day, and I kind of asked a couple of people, didn't get a great reaction, did it anyway, and within a couple of weeks I had 100 followers, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. Like 100 followers. And here we are a few years later with, 7 or 8,000 and something followers, and, interviewing authors and going to events, and that just, it doesn't, and like really, when it comes to the book club, I get a spark of an idea, I throw it up and see if it works. And I've been very lucky that a lot of times it has. I don't really remember, thankfully, anything that has flopped. A couple of the book choices have, but that's part of the fun of a book club. But other than that, I can't kind of believe that this many people are following and that this many people are engaged. And I've met so many people through the book club now, and like people I consider to be my friends, and that's incredible. Like if it had stayed at 100 people and they were the people that are on the book club and chatting about the books, that'd be fine with me. This is, but the fact that I think, hundreds of people have said to me at various stages over the last few years that they've got back into reading, or they've enjoyed a book, or even that some of the stories, like from some of the non-fiction books, that they've kind of said to me, oh, I experienced that, or, this really resonated with me, or, like people have shared, some really, really personal stories, and I feel very privileged that they've felt able to do that either with me or on the book club Zooms. So yeah, no, I'm just totally winging it here. I don't know, like, we'll see what happens tomorrow. Like,
well, you sound very professional all the time, so it's fair play to you.
Your goals for the rest of us.
I remember doing the first. I think the first Instagram live I did was with Sophie White, and that was kind of her idea. Sophie just, again, this is how my ideas come about. So Corpse Thing was coming out. I'd mentioned it on stories. Sophie contacted me and said, if you'd like to do an Insta live or something sometime, let me know. And I was like, yeah, cool. And then I was like, why don't I make that a series? And I ended up interviewing a couple of different authors, Catherine Ryan Howard, Andrea Mara, Jamie O'Connell. that just kind of came out of just somebody making a little suggestion, and it's something that I will hopefully get to more authors. I think I've been kind of focused more on the book club in the last year or so, and that takes up, you know, a good bit of time with the Zooms and stuff like that. But you just kind of get used to it, you know, and I don't really take myself too seriously when it comes to these things. I'll go on stories, go on live, chat to authors. You do obviously have to prepare, especially when you're talking to somebody like Deirdre Finnerty, who's, you know, a writer and a journalist herself. But, you know, you get used to it.
Yeah, and I think the amount of engagement and stuff is just a testament to how accessible the book club is. Like both myself and Claire have said that the Tired Mammy 30 minutes, like it's such a simple idea, but it's so genius. You know, that you were, you know, as Claire said, you're carving out that time for yourself, whether it's in 5 minute increments or a half an hour at a time. You know, it's very doable, it's very accessible, and it's an idea that makes reading seem like much easier to people who are finding getting back into reading difficult, which is a lot of people what ends up happening. I think, you know, that they kind of fall out of it when they have kids or when they become quite involved in their jobs or whatever. So it's the accessibility of it and the fact that you're very, you know, it's consistent, which is great. You know, you have your thing every month. People kind of know the way things are going to work and appreciate that. And that makes it really easy for people to engage with and get on board with. And the success you've gotten from it is absolutely worth what you've put in for the last 3.5 years.
It's like, you know, in terms of the accessibility, like that's something that has been really, really important to me, and more important as time has gone on, because it's something that I know I get feedback all the time about that. And I think, you know, that, like, again, Tired Mammy 30 minutes, that was just a random idea one day. Love Island is coming to an end. Not a program I've watched, but everybody was watching it. Everybody was talking about it online. So I kind of thought to myself, well, if you've been watching that, why not take that time and instead of watching that, now that it's over, read for 30 minutes. So that was Tired Mammy 30 minutes. And I think somebody said to me literally at the weekend, I was talking about books, of course, and they said, God, aren't you lucky you have time to read? And I was like, I have a full-time job. I have 2 small children, you know, who go to school and creche in 2 different directions. You know, I have a house and dinners to make and laundry to do. And, you know, between myself and my husband, we're like ships in the night, you know, yourselves, like, but you have to make that time. And, you know, audiobooks are a way that I make that time, because I drop the kids to school or creche and I have the journey back, pop in the audiobook. I'm putting on, you know, I actually don't think I can hang up clothes without listening to an audiobook. I don't think that I would have the motor skills to do it without the audiobook plugged in. If I'm making dinner, I'm listening to an audiobook. And then I do, you know, read physical books when I get into bed at night. And again, it's like you said, Rebecca, increments of 5-10 minutes. The 30 minutes doesn't have to be done in one lot. If it is, that's great. But I think it's really important that we make that time for ourselves. And, you know, reading is such a pleasure and such an important thing for me and for you, I know. And yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, the accessibility part, like having some of that has just come by circumstance, like having the Zoom. And I've always said to people, you know, if you come on late, if you have to go attend to the kids, or, you know, if the cat walks across the screen, or, you know, you need to just plug in an earphone and go, you know, leave your camera off, go on mute. There's no problem with any of that. Some people have said to me, oh, I didn't want to join because of this or because of that. And I'm like, just plug in an earphone. You don't have to contribute.
That's it. And it just, because I actually do remember following the page when you were having the in-person meetings. And I remember being like, oh, I wish there was something like that closer to me. And then obviously due to everything, the way the world went, they had to go online. And I was so glad, because like it just gave me the opportunity to. And other, you know, I've seen there's some people that are quite consistent every month, but there's always a few different faces at it as well, which is lovely.
I have no desire to go back to a purely in-person meetup, because I think it would, you know, you'd lose so many people that wouldn't be able to come, and that just wouldn't be it for me. Like, But I also think it's great that now we can kind of meet up a bit, that we have had, meetups at various things. There's been so many book events lately that I've got to meet up with people. And I do hope that, some of us will get down to Cork next year and, maybe up to Belfast or wherever, like, we'll start a travelling roadshow,
Be lovely.
Sounds good. Count us in. So yeah, I think Sinead, we're delighted that you spoke to us. You've been such an influence on us and an influence on the Irish Bookstagram community in general. And it's great to hear about you yourself, because usually, we're seeing you and you're talking to other people about about books or whatever. So it was really nice to chat to you about you.
Thanks for having me on. I'm dying to see who's going to be next and who else you're going to be chatting to.
Well, we could stop recording and we could tell you, actually.
Okay, stop recording. Give me the gossip.
So that was a super interesting interview with Sinead. She was the top of our list for someone that we wanted to speak to when we were discussing who we could have on the podcast. And we're thrilled that we heard so much from her, because we often see Sinead on the book club meetings, or people meet her at events, but it's very rarely we get to hear about her herself. So that was super interesting, and I really enjoyed listening to you chatting, Claire.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed just her bit of advice about allowing yourself to have a reading slump, because I know for myself, if I'm having a reading slump, I kind of beat myself up about it. I'm like, come on, pick up a book now. And sometimes, as she said, you just need to allow yourself have that, and you'll naturally pick up another book that you're drawn to. There can be an awful lot of pressure on ourselves to keep reading and stuff. But yeah, I think allowing ourselves to not read can be a good thing as well. So thank you for that advice.
Yeah, no, that it really made sense. And sometimes it's just not until you hear someone else say something like that you go, that makes so much sense, and I've never thought about it before. And especially from someone who is as involved in books as Sinead is. So we were, our aim is for every episode or every chapter that we would finish with some sort of a book recommendation. So we thought it would be fitting today to have a very quick chat about the first books that each of us read as our Tired Mammy Book Club kind of intro. So when we first kind of properly read a book and got involved with the online book club. So Claire, what was your one?
My first one was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I'm trying to find the name of the author there. I can't think of it offhand. Is it Holly, I'm going to say Johnson or
Holly Jackson.
Jackson, yeah. I know a Holly Johnson, actually. You'll have to
Holly.
cut that out. But yeah, Holly Jackson. I really enjoyed that. It was my first time, I think, even it was during the time when Sinead had said there that she used to just post the questions up on Instagram and people would comment underneath instead of doing a Zoom or whatever. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And it was a nice way to kind of introduce myself to her book clubs, because I didn't feel nervous about a video call or having to speak or anything like that. So yeah, but that is a fantastic book, and I actually didn't continue on with the series, and I keep telling myself, like, you really loved that, pick up the second book, because they are ones that
they're
that I
so
found quite
good.
gripping, that book. Yeah.
And I think both of us, like, I know there were some people I remember on that meeting, that maybe weren't the biggest fans, but they kind of admitted themselves that they, it is a YA book, a young adult book. So obviously we weren't exactly the target audience, but some people like us do enjoy reading YA books as well. And that series is great. And if you can listen to them, actually they're brilliant, because they're done almost like in a podcast style. So I would recommend listening to those if you get the opportunity. They're great.
Yeah, and they're ones that I recommend as well to the kids in school when they're, when we're talking about books and they're kind of going, I don't know what I want to read. I'll always say, I read this one and it's really, really good. And then you get a couple of others joining in and going, oh yeah, that was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. So it is very accessible to different age groups and stuff too. So it's worth picking up for the teenager in your life. Yeah.
Excellent.
What about you, Rebecca? What was your first one?
My first one, I had to check, because I actually wasn't sure. I knew it was around February, March or whenever of last year, and it was actually the first one I got involved in was A Girl A by Abigail Dean.
Yeah.
Which is quite dark. It is about a young girl who has survived an abusive situation, and it kind of goes between her, it kind of now we'll say, and then flashes back to her life when she was in that situation. Yeah, it was very dark, and it's not the kind of book I would necessarily have picked up without it being the book club pick. So that would be a perfect example for me of a book that I probably wouldn't have read otherwise. I enjoyed it as much as you can say you enjoy a book about that kind of topic.
Yeah.
It was definitely quite different to anything I had read previously. Yeah, like obviously it's a book that would have quite a lot of content warnings, and you'd have to be in a certain mindset to read that kind of a book. But yeah, it was well worth reading. It prompted a lot of discussion as well, which made it a really good book club pick.
That's a good one. I was gifted that one, and I need to keep going with it. It was one, one of those ones where you're just kind of going, I can't actually deal with that right now.
Yeah.
It was, so I think it's one that I would definitely pick up, because I do find that kind of a topic very psychologically interesting.
Yeah.
So it is good from that perspective, but I know that at the time I was reading it and I was kind of going, oh, I can't, just not yet.
Yeah,
So,
and totally understandable. Yeah, you'd absolutely have to be in the right kind of headspace for it. So I think we are officially done now. So there are our recommendations based off of our Tired Mammy Book Club experience. Sinead has given us some fantastic recommendations based off of her running of the book club and books that she feels would be great to get back into reading, and so on. So I think that's it. Until next time. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of Another Chapter podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share to keep the book conversation going. Thank you to Helen Becerra for the graphics, Mark Neville for the mixing, and to each of our contributors. Music is Make It Work by All Good Folks.
Don't forget to follow along on Instagram at Another Chapter Podcast. We'll see you there.